Okay, today we're going to talk about questioning yourself. This is one of those things that tends to creep up, and it's something that I struggled with. So I thought it would be a good topic, especially because I think a lot of you might be dealing with this, and I know in the early stages of this, I was dealing with it quite a bit. Bottom line is sometimes you're just not really sure what you're dealing with. You know, you've been looking at all this information, you think that they fit the traits of a narcissist, but you're not entirely sure. And there are times where you start to question what's really going on and what your perception is, and whether you're making a rash decision or you're correct or whatnot. And it can be really frustrating and intimidating. Not intimidating, that's not the right word, but it can be one of those things where confusing, that's the better word. It can be really confusing because you're not entirely sure what you're dealing with, and then you start to question what's going on. The other thing about this is distance can actually make it a little bit worse, because once you've had some time away from the person, either using hybrid no contact or just completely no contact, but when they're not constantly in your face and causing problems and things are basically stable, you can think that maybe you got it wrong, or maybe they're not really a narcissist. Maybe they're just, they were just angry and things have settled down with time and now things will be better. And this happens a lot whenever you switch tactics, right? You start to do something different. So you're using hybrid no contact. You're using gray rock. Well, gray rock, you're actually going to be interacting with them. But if you're doing something to where you don't actually interact with them on a regular basis, you can start to think that the tactic is a little bit different. Maybe they haven't modified yet to try to reattack you, so to speak. So you start to let your guard down. But here's the thing, you have to be really careful in this situation. You have to basically approach it very cautiously to make sure that you don't actually get burned. That's especially true when you finally think that you have them figured out. Now, the thing is I fell into that trap a lot, especially in the early stages of this. I would change a tactic, she would change, she would adapt to it. And then periodically, when they're not getting the attention from you, they're gonna try to lull you back in, which means that they will try to pretend that they're ready to co-parent or pretend that they're ready to communicate, or open those doors up. Like I said, I had that happen to me quite a few times, and pretty much every time that I thought something was changed or had changed, it pretty much blew up in my face. So be careful of that and be, mindful of what's going on. Now, I get that this is kind of a depressing way to think about it, and can seem a little negative. But the problem is, at least in my situation, and you may have experienced this yourself, is that as you try to do the right thing, as you try to communicate with them, or you try to co-parent, or whenever they try to open the door back up, you feel like you want to do it, right? Because that's probably what you've been fighting for. That's what you've been wanting them to do. So now that they're trying to do it, you're kind of in this quandary of, well, what do you do, right? Do you ignore them, or do you try to see if it's genuine? And I get that, and I understand the complexities of it. And unfortunately, more than likely, you're probably going to have to at least test the waters a couple of times to prove to yourself what you're actually dealing with. And it's incredibly frustrating because, well, let me back up. If you can do this as a test, right? So in my situation, had I been dealing with or had developed the hybrid no contact, right? And I was doing that, and then this other thing happened where she was trying to reach out. And if I was doing the absolute thinking and the black hole thinking and all that stuff, then I might have been in a better position to say, okay, I think this is a trap. I need to test the waters, so I'm going to, I will answer some of these comments, or I will see where it's going to go to see if things are changed. But you keep your basically your guard up and keep your eyes open for what's going on, then you might be in a better situation. Now, that isn't what happened with me. I thought, oh, thank God, finally things are calmed down. I mean, I remember an example of this is after the first vacation that she took and went back and took the kids and went back home to visit right over the Christmas break, which I've talked about that in the past. when she first came back, it seemed like there was a little bit of a difference. And I was thinking, oh my God, finally, maybe someone talked some sense into her or whatever. And she was trying to communicate. And I'm like, okay, great. So I basically stepped up to the plate to engage with her. The problem is it was a trap, right? It wasn't that it was genuine. It was she adapted her tactic to try to suck me back in to get me to engage. And it did actually work. Like I said before though, the problem was for me is that I thought it was real. So when I, basically stepped into the door, so to speak, I was doing it from a position of thinking, okay, everything that's happened so far isn't really real. It was just anger, or, I made the excuses for it. And I basically walked in and basically got sucker punched by the tactics. And that's really what you have to be careful of. Okay, so now I've talked a little bit about this, about, some of you may be in the situation where you're like, well, I'm not sure, but you need to test the waters. And I understand that. But here's the thing, and this rolls into one of the things one of my mainstays that I talk about, which is absolute thinking. And this is where that is really important. It's very important to remember who you're dealing with. Even if they give you signs that maybe you're wrong, stick with the absolute thinking until there is enough evidence and enough actions and words that basically back up that there's a change, then you can back off on that. But up until that time, you need to remember what you're dealing with, the type of person you're dealing with, and what you expect them to potentially do. Guys, I absolutely understand how frustrating this is. And I will tell you that one of the reasons why I created a lot of these techniques was this questioning phase that I got trapped in. I was not sure what I was dealing with, and I was second guessing myself, and I was thinking that I must be wrong. I remember thinking before I knew about narcissism that it's like, wow, she just acts like a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old. And early on, when I used to basically say, okay, what would an adolescent or an early teen do? I could pretty much guess what she was going to try to do. But with that, I still hadn't made the connection of that, of narcissism and personality disorders. I don't know what the heck I thought it was. It didn't make a lot of sense, but I could see little traits that didn't necessarily make sense, but it was like, okay, well, for whatever reason, she's stuck in this mode. But it was driving me crazy. It was causing my anxiety to stay. It was causing my depression to run rampant, and I just couldn't make sense of it. And it basically, it trapped me in that mode to where I just couldn't move forward. Because if I tried to say in my own mind, I tried to say, well, she's this way. And then it's like, well, no, that can't be. People aren't like that. People, a 40-year-old isn't stuck as a teenager. That doesn't make any sense. Why would that even be, And you can get yourself to where you're second guessing what's going on. And bottom line is, and that's one of the main reasons why I came up with absolute thinking, and what helped me was to turn around and basically look at it and say, okay, this is exactly who she is. And primarily I developed the absolute thinking after I realized what narcissism was. And I still was questioning. It's like, well, is she really that? Does she really fit the traits? Am I just blowing it out of proportion? And am I just, in need so much to find an excuse to make this legitimate, to make it not my fault, I guess, that's what she has to be? And it was driving me insane. Right? And you're probably, if you're in the early stages of this, you're probably going through the same thing. That's why I came up with absolute thinking. And it's like, I knew that if I didn't stop myself, I was going to be trapped. So that's when I basically was like, no, this is who she is. It's 100% fact. It's without question, without fail. This is what I'm dealing with. That helped me because whenever those times came up where I started questioning it, I could have that little mantra flick off in my head and say, no, you know what you're dealing with, right? Now, you can still, when those things happen, you can still let things play out and see what happens. And if, for whatever reason, they happen to demonstrate to you that they are not acting like a narcissist, then okay, maybe you were wrong. More than likely, because these people can't accept responsibility, they're not going to apologize about what's going on, they're not going to try to make amends, and it's going to be a bunch of lip service and it's going to be a bunch of blame shifting. So when you see those, it's real easy to recognize what you're dealing with. If you're stuck in that phase where you're questioning what's going on, I get it. And it's something that I think every one of us has gone through. And unfortunately, a lot of these things all of us have gone through. The good part about it is it makes it something that's repeatable and measurable, and you can basically outline the type of behavior so that other people can go, oh yeah, exactly, that's what they're doing. So again, if you're stuck in that, just don't beat yourself up on this. If you have to test the waters, if you aren't really sure and you basically say, okay, I'm going to see how this plays out, and you basically get poked right in the eye, don't walk back and beat yourself up thinking that you've been abused again, right? Just use it as a data point to say, okay, you weren't entirely sure, you were testing, and you had to make sure for the good of your kids and that type of thing. And if you get a data point that basically reinforces what you know, then just make a point of it and say, okay, well, it was worth it to find out that, right? And then, granted, when I was going through it, it didn't feel real good. I mean, it wasn't like every time that happened, I wasn't like, wow, that just proved to me what I was dealing with. No, it was painful, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. Unfortunately, like I said before, when I was doing that, I still didn't know what I was dealing with, and I was still confused. So, hopefully because you're watching this channel and you're dealing with it, you're not in the same position I was in. So on that, I'm gonna wrap this video up. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, please subscribe. If you haven't had a chance to go over to the website and sign up for the newsletter, please do that. I would appreciate it, and I will chat with you guys in the next video. So take care, bye.